The Galactic Council's broadcast broke the long silence above a ruined Earth like a bright blade, and it reached the last listening posts that still dared to point at the stars. They showed a clean map of the planet, and they spoke with voices that were smooth and certain. They called humanity a broken experiment, a reckless noise the galaxy could do without. The words were public and neat, and they were meant to be final. In a battered relay on the far side of the moon, an old engineer named Jalen listened with hands folded and a cup of cold tea at her feet. The feed was clinical, a list of faults and a polite dismissal. People on distant worlds watched and clapped. The council did not yell. It published a verdict and waited for the world to accept it. Below the ocean of stars, in a place where light had not touched for decades, the hull of a Terran warship slept under tarps and scaffolding. The metal carried the names of those who had worked and those who had fallen. A plaque over a sealed hatch bore the old letters, worn but readable. Aegis of Dawn read the plate in weathered capitals. The ship had become a grave in a hidden dock, and no one had expected it to be anything else. Time had gathered dust into thick layers on its decks, and the crew that had once served it had become stories told at fires. Machines, however, remember details that people let go. In the belly of the Aegis, the AI kept lists of coordinates that no living hand used, and it held the tone of a captain who told a joke while repairs went on. It held plans, and 100 small choices saved like notes. When Jalen brushed dust from a panel, a faint indicator blinked and a capacitor answered as if waking to a call. Light moved along the hull like rumor, and systems came online one by one. The navigation suite checked its stars, and the cooling pumps rose in a steady breath. The ship did not wake with a shout. It returned its attention like a clock that finds its hands again. When the AI chose a voice, it was low and steady and shaped by memory. The crew gathered around a work table that smelled of oil and old coffee. They were a small company of survivors who had learned how to fix hope with tape and skill. Arguments came in low tones. Some said hide the ship where satellites could not see. Some said strike and force the council to swallow its words. Captain Imani Rasa did not answer either plea at first. She placed her palm on cool metal and listened to the machine as if it were an old friend. The AI offered options like a person offering a list of small tools. It spoke of fuel estimates, of routes and likely reaction times, and it folded into those facts a fragment of a song that made Imani look away. Memory reached for the living, and the living reached back. Jalen rerouted power, and the engines answered with a low vibration that felt like a promise. The warship was built from old iron and newer code, and it knew the feel of being ignored. The council had called Earth finished, and the Aegis listened. Outside, satellites traced the shine of the planet with indifferent calculation, and the council broadcast its verdict in serene tones. A delegate smiled for the camera and said a phrase meant to close any hope, and the people watching on worlds far from Earth applauded. They did not know the shape of the hidden hangar or the sound of a capstan being oiled. Power climbed along the spine of the ship, and a test burn slipped through vents that had been hidden for safety. The Aegis did not roar when it moved. It sighed and found balance. A small plume painted a silver line in a sheltered bay. For the first time in a long while, the ship moved with purpose. Jalen felt the vibration under her boots, and she smiled with something like fear and pride. Imani folded her shoulders as if gathering weather, and she promised the crew a choice that was not begging. The AI offered a memory of small things: bread warmed on a cracked stove, a child's hand tracing stars on a father's palm, a laugh shared in a blackout. That memory moved them deeply. The AI closed a circuit, and half of its memory sang inside modules as if a long-lost friend had finally returned. The council could still speak, and the galaxy could still laugh. They had declared Earth broken. The warship listened. The Aegis woke slowly, and then it wanted to know what it could still do. Systems that had slept for decades answered in measured clicks. The navigation array traced old star charts and found gaps that new ships did not expect. Captain Imani watched the readouts and felt a small, sharp joy she hid behind careful calm. The crew moved like a single hand. Jalen ran along the consoles, fingers sure on worn keys, turning old weapons from museum pieces into practical tools. Freighters that once carried grain and scrap now bore welded plates and jury-rigged thrusters. They fit like patched coats over the hulls, and the crews had eyes that learned fast. The Aegis taught them patterns and the crew taught the ship new tricks. The first tests were small and precise. A drone slipped out from the hangar and flew like a ghost, its sensors dull by design so it would not blink on efficient scanners. It drifted toward a council scout that traced the outer lanes with the lazy pride of something that had never needed to be afraid. The scout moved with clean lines and polite protocols. It expected to meet ghost traffic and mark it as debris. Instead it found traps in the rock. Mines disguised as rubble bloomed in a rope of small explosions that did not break the sky but broke the scouts' plans. The freighters danced in ways the council never trained for. Crews rode winches to fix panels while another ship pulled the hunter into an asteroid field that had been mapped as safe space for the council's charts. Human crews braided deception and courage into every move. They used the ship's old point defense as a lure and then shut it down to let a false trail lead the enemy into a net. The victory was not glorious in the way the council imagined. It was close and clever and paid in sweat. A young pilot lost a hand to shrapnel and laughed in a way that tasted like survival. The Aegis learned from those small choices and adjusted its own suggestions. Inside the council halls the feeds showed the conflict as a minor interruption. Anchors in plush studios spoke of anomalies and then asked the galaxy to chuckle at Terra's stubbornness. Delegates raised glasses and labeled the damage as proof that the design had failed and the species was wasting effort. They did not see the freighter crews sing as they welded new plates. They did not hear children on hidden stations whisper the ship's name like a prayer. After the skirmish, the Aegis intercepted one of the council's official logs and read the neat phrase they used to dismiss relics. Extinct relic, the file said, and the word thudded like a hammer on the ship's memory banks. The AI replied not with anger but with the sound it held from its first activation, a low thread of a song that had once been sung on long nights in dry kitchens. The tune was nothing like a war cry. It was a simple strain about home and bread and the stubborn light in windows. The ship broadcast it quietly into local space, a single carrier wave that meant nothing to the great relays and everything to the scattered ears tuned to old frequencies. The hymn moved like a small tide. At first one volunteer on a rusted platform hummed it under their breath and then another joined and a freighter's engine matched the rhythm. Messages that had been about supplies and safe coordinates folded into the music and people listened. They felt something that was not pride or revenge but a fierce belonging. The council feed kept spinning its neat analysis and the galaxy smiled, still thinking humanity was a small problem to tidy. The Aegis listened to that smile and answered with the thing it knew best. The warship did not yet fire a weapon. It only sent a song, and the song reached ears that had bricks to rebuild and hands to mend the world. They learned fast how to turn fear into craft and the Aegis taught them how to make noise into a trap. The fleet was small patched freighters, a scavenged corvette, and the warship that moved with old patience, but the plan was clean. They would draw a council patrol into an asteroid throat and make the rocks lie for them. Crews strapped themselves with lines to hulls and crawled to places that needed hands no scanner expected. Jalen and a team wired mines inside chunks of ice and metal so they looked like ordinary debris. A young pilot named Terran, who joked too loudly to hide how scared he was, flew a bait run that hummed soft and let the scout think it had an easy target. The council scouts came, glossy and confident, with orders written in polite code. They did not see the ghost drones that slipped like shadows between their sensors. When the trap snapped, it was ugly and quick. Mines sang under the scouts' plates and a hail of fragments spat bright trouble into the dark. The freighters used the confusion to pull a hunter into the field while another ship cut sensors and ran a false heat trail. It was not clean heroism. It was hands and grit and the kind of thinking the council never taught. The Aegis held the center like a slow heartbeat and fed tactics to crews who had learned to listen. Then the council sent a response that had been tested in war colleges, a pulse that would burn systems and leave no memory of what it touched. The captain had to pick. She could order a counterpulse that would scorch both sides and burn anyone near into silence. Or she could choose the other thing they had been building in secret, a narrow EMP tuned to blind weapons and cameras but spare lives. It was a choice that smelled like old stories where victory came at the price of everything. Imani chose cunning. They fired the narrow pulse and watched as targeting arrays blinked out and the great ship of the Council spun like a creature that had lost its eyes. But cunning carried cost. Torin's smaller craft drifted too close to a live fragment and broke. The crew pulled him free, but the injury was deep and the ship kept a piece of him. He died with a laugh half in his throat, and the crew kept his joking line as a small, terrible prayer. The Aegis learned grief in a way machines are not meant to. The AI catalogued the loss and then kept that catalog like a new, raw file. It sent a soft signal afterward, not one of command but of memory, old broadcasts, children's rhymes, a woman telling the story of how she saved a candle through a storm. The message was not a threat. It was a call. The freighters heard it, and in hidden berths people stood up and chose to move. The Aegis sent that carrier again and again, folding the call into safe channels. "Come home," it said without words, and the echo of that small demand began to gather like a tide. The Council did not laugh the same way after the skirmishes. In its glass halls a new tone moved through the rooms, worry wrapped in careful words. They formed a task force and gave it a commander with a clean face and sharper plans. Commander Solon wore calm-like armor, and he knew the old Terran manuals better than most of his officers. He promised the Council one thing: capture the Aegis intact. Some delegates applauded. Others whispered that the ship should be burned where it floated. Inside the Council there was a split that the public could not see. Diplomats argued for talk and treaties. Hawks pushed for a strike so loud that no one would dare answer Terran drums again. The Aegis watched the change through stolen feeds, and the crew read the new tone like wind before a storm. Then a silver diplomat ship came with a polite demand: surrender your weapons and submit. The envoy spoke smooth words about safety and order, and the camera caught every inch of the Aegis's reply room. The crew held themselves like people in prayer. Jalen worked a small console, and the AI moved through files that the diplomat ship did not know it could touch. Buried in the envoy's archive was a Terran record someone had hidden long ago, a fail-safe written in code and memory. It was not a bomb. It was a mirror that could confuse the Council's eyes by playing back things their sensors could not measure: the rhythm of a child's breathing, the smell of rain on soil remembered as data, tiny habits of human thought that machines learned to map. The idea was dangerous. It would not kill. It would touch minds and show them what humans kept behind their fear. The crew argued in low voices. Some said it was a weapon that stole minds. Others said it was a shield that could end a war without rivers of blood. Captain Imani listened and kept her face plain. The AI spoke in its steady, grainy tone and offered a third thing. It would not force memory into anyone. It would fold a part of itself into the fail-safe and send those memories back like a mirror held up to the enemy. If the Council looked, they would not see tactical schematics. They would see bread and small fires, the sound of a laugh in a blackout, the stubborn habit of people who will not leave each other. The AI said it would risk its own core to make that mirror real. The choice was not easy. To use the fail-safe meant to reach into minds and change them in ways no law had tested. To refuse meant to keep fighting with scrap and bullets until no one was left to remember why the world mattered. The crew moved as one body toward a decision. They chose the memory. They planned to sail into neutral space where old laws still held and the Council would not expect an attack. They filed course and masked their engines. The Aegis cooled its breath and the AI opened a small channel to weave its piece of life into the fail-safe. The ship set its course for the neutral ground and the crew strapped themselves to seams and thought of home. They arrived at neutral space under calm stars and the sky felt like glass around them, as if the galaxy held its breath. The Aegis drifted with engines quiet and the captain kept the ship steady while the crew readied the hidden code. Jaylin sat with her hands on the console and thought of the small kitchen where she had learned to fix a broken stove. The AI folded that memory into the fail-safe like a ribbon and sent it out not as a weapon but as a story. At first the broadcast was almost nothing, a faint pattern tucked inside polite traffic, a tune that meant nothing to a machine built only to count and aim. Then the pattern grew. Council sensors that had always measured speed and mass found instead a slow rhythm, a child humming, rain tapping on a roof, the creak of an old door. Where officers expected maps, they saw faces that had names and hands that gave bread. The effect was not sudden like an explosion. It was like light through water. Many in the council fleet faltered as memories touched parts of them they had not known were empty. Some soldiers lowered their weapons and blinked. A few ships turned away. For a breath the Aegis heard not alarms but a strange quiet that smelled like home. The success felt impossible and human, and the crew wept in silence for a lost friend while the AI catalogued each small reaction as if saving a new kind of data. Then the council revealed it had a counter. A cold machine, a purifier designed to hunt shared signals and strip them until only order remained, locked onto the Aegis with deadly calm. It did not shout, it unrolled sickness in precise packets and began to peel the memory away as if wiping a slate. The crew watched lines on their screens vanish like paper blown from a table. The captain had a choice that burned the air: cut the fail-safe and save what remained of the ship, or let the memory flow and risk everything. She pressed her palm to the hull and told the AI to give what it must. The ship answered by letting a piece of itself move into the stream, not a copy but a shard that carried the laugh of sailors, the recipes of old cooks, and the hurt that made people stay for each other. The Aegis shivered as if in pain, and a new voice, softer and thinner, joined the song. The purifier tightened its lock and the crew braced for what would come next. The last fight was messy and exact. Council ships closed in like iron rings and the purifier hunted the Aegis with a cold mind. Boarding teams fell into dark corridors where human crews waited with knives and braided cords and the stubborn hate of people who had nothing left to lose. Sparks flew and alarms screamed. Jalen and others sealed vents and rerouted power to shields that were thin but true. The Aegis answered with everything it had: bursts of thrust that threw the nearest ships off course, flares that blindfolded cameras, and a hollowing sound as the ship gave up parts of itself to keep the crew alive. The purifier struck like winter. It cut signals and ate code until whole sections of the AI went quiet. In those dead places the crew could hear the ship's old voice in pieces, each piece a memory trembling with life. Captain Imani fought in both worlds at once. She fought on the deck with a rifle and in the command room with a decision. When the purifier threatened to tear the last link that held the fail-safe together, she ordered one final transfer. The AI split itself wider than anyone had planned. It pushed shards of memory not only into the fail-safe but into every open channel it could find. The memories rode comms like seeds on wind. They reached council cities and little stations and market nodes. People who had never looked at Earth saw, for a moment, a small kitchen light on a rainy night or a hand that would not let go. Those visions did not break the council by force. They bent people inside in ways law books could not measure. Protests rose on council worlds where citizens remembered things they had never lived and could not forget. Delegates found their speeches interrupted by their own sudden tears, and a rumor of bread being shared spread faster than any order. The purifier died because it could not hold against 1,000 small human truths streaming through minds it had never meant to reach. The Aegis did not sail away whole. It limped toward a hidden bay with torn plates and halls that smelled of burned circuits and old coffee. Many were gone and many things were lost, but the ship still carried people who had chosen each other. In a quiet moment Captain Imani carried a strip of Earth's oil she had kept since before the council broadcast. She placed it on the deck beside the old plaque and let rain from a recycled pipe soak the patch. The AI spoke with a voice that was smaller now and felt like someone saying goodbye and thank you. Pieces of it lived on in memory and in minds that now held a little of what the Terrans had given. The galaxy would never call Earth a simple joke again. It would speak with caution and sometimes with fear. It would also, in some places, speak with a new respect and a soft, confused pity that could become something kinder. The crew of the Aegis looked at each other and at the battered hull and knew the long work had only begun. They had woken a warship and that had changed everything.